Life is full of surprises you can't predict. I thought to myself that evening, as I sat alone with Gary in the tiny hotel room. My husband Logan being away in another city for the last few months had already made me so tense. I missed him, of course, but it wasn't just his absence. It was his neglect, his lack of interest. That was the real problem. Lonely nights were eating away at my soul. But how could I have known that asking my stepson Gary to take me to your dad would end up with us stuck in a hotel room together? A tiny hotel room with a single bed. I had no idea what was going to happen. Let me tell you everything from the beginning, every little detail. Believe me, the end of this story will be much more exciting than you expect. As I was leaving the house that morning, I took a quick look at myself in the mirror. I was tense, yes, but I still looked good. Even with Logan leaving me so alone, I still felt desirable, still felt alive. But even these feelings weren't enough anymore. They didn't satisfy me. In the kitchen, Gary was finishing his breakfast when I called to him from behind. "You're starting college at the end of the summer, I know, but you need to get better at driving. Come on, take me to your dad's." He looked up at me, the same cheeky grin on his face that he always wore. Gary was a sweet boy with a quirky, funny side, but he could be a bit of a troublemaker at times. "All right, stepmom," he said teasingly, "but on one condition. Tell Dad to get me a better car for the summer." "We'll talk about it," I said sharply, pushing him away. But inside I was just thinking, let's just get this trip over with. But I had no idea that the trip wouldn't go as planned. We'd been driving for about 2 hours. I was sitting in the back seat, fiddling with my phone, while Gary was humming along to some random song on the radio and making stupid jokes that only made him laugh. Then suddenly, the car made this horrible noise, a hissing sound, and then died completely. "What's happening?" I asked, trying not to sound too freaked out. "I think the car broke down," Gary mumbled, pulling off to the side of the road in obvious annoyance. So here we were, stuck in the middle of nowhere. The signal on my phone was barely there, and there wasn't a soul around to help. We spent 2 hours arguing, calling every mechanic we could find, and trying to fix the damn thing. Finally, we had to accept the obvious. The only option was to spend the night in the nearest motel. At the motel reception, while Gary talked to the guy at the desk, I stood behind him, frustrated as hell. If Logan hears about this, he'll lose it, I thought. But strangely, I didn't feel like it mattered that much at that moment. Deep down, I just knew that tonight was going to change things. Before this story gets any weirder, make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on these notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss the rest. At the end of it all, I'd love to see your support in the comments and with these likes. When we got to the room and opened the door, all my expectations crashed and burned. The room was tiny, barely big enough to turn around in. One bed, one bedside table, a dim, flickering overhead light that made everything look dingy. The ceiling felt low, the air conditioning barely worked, and the one small window looked out onto the car park. "This is it?" I muttered, disappointed. Gary came in behind me, laughing. "What did you expect? A 5-star hotel? Relax, stepmom, it's only one night." That teasing tone again, the same grin. It was driving me mad, but at the same time, it was stirring something inside me that I couldn't explain. And even though I hated to admit it, the idea of being stuck here alone with Gary tonight didn't seem too bad. "This heat is killing me," I said, rubbing my neck. "I think I need a shower, or I'm seriously going to faint." "Sure, sure," Gary said casually, throwing himself onto the bed and lying flat on his back. "This is your kingdom, Carmen. Do whatever you need to make yourself at home." I looked at him for a second. His slender but toned frame, mixed with the slight boyishness of his face, gave him a strange kind of charm. But I quickly tried to push the thought out of my mind. He was Logan's son, after all. My stepson. I stepped into the bathroom and closed the door behind me. For a moment, I just stared at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was sticking to my skin from the heat, but I still looked good. I still had that spark. I turned on the shower, let the water run, and stepped under it, hoping it would wash away the jumble of emotions that were building up inside me. I'm 47 years old, I thought. And Gary is no longer a child. He's 22, about to start college. And here we are, stuck together in this tiny hotel room for a few days. The thought unsettled and excited me in a way I couldn't quite describe. Logan popped into my head. Logan, I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to see you, to be with you. But now I'm here, stuck in this hotel room with your son, and I don't know how I feel about it. The steam from the shower filled the small bathroom, the heat relaxing my body even as my mind raced. Gary's grin, his easygoing nature, it sparked something unexpected in me. Standing under the stream of water, I couldn't tell what that spark might become, but I knew something was changing. Later, I decided to go downstairs for dinner and clear my head a bit. I put on a light, flowing dress. It was perfect for the heat, but it also made me feel a little more comfortable, as if I was trying to shake off this strange tension. The hotel restaurant was simple but cozy, fitting for such a small place. I ordered a light meal and a glass of wine, hoping it would help me relax. The sun had set, and the street lamps outside the hotel were glowing softly. Sitting there, I couldn't stop my mind from wandering back to the room upstairs. I wonder what Gary is up to right now, I thought. Someone as restless and full of energy as he was probably wasn't enjoying being cooped up in a small room, but somehow that relaxed attitude of his, so effortless, so carefree, was driving me crazy in a way I couldn't quite explain. When my wine was gone, I took one last look at my plate and made my way upstairs, taking slow steps. When I reached the room, everything was so quiet. I opened the door, and the sight that greeted me took my breath away for a moment. Gary had taken a shower and was lying on the bed in just a robe, completely knocked out. The half-open robe showed most of his lean, fit body. His damp hair fell over his forehead, and there was a faint smile on his lips, as if he was dreaming. My heart began to pound. It was the last thing I expected to walk into. For a second, I froze at the door, not knowing what to do. There was this strange mix of emotions inside me. I was embarrassed, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. Carmen, what the hell are you doing? That's Logan's son, I scolded myself. But my eyes betrayed me, drawn to the part of his robe that had slipped further open. What I saw stirred something warm inside me. The small size of the room only made matters worse. There wasn't another bed. It was either sleep next to him or spend the rest of the night in a chair. And in this heat, the thought of a chair seemed impossible. I walked slowly into the room, Gary's steady, rhythmic breathing filling the room. I took a deep breath and tried to concentrate, but the chaos inside me made it impossible to think straight. I've got to pull myself together. Okay, Carmen, I muttered to myself. It's just one night, nothing more. It doesn't mean anything. I wanted to surprise Logan, and now I'm stuck here. Be rational, keep it together. I took a few steps towards the bed and looked at Gary. The innocent look on his face only complicated my already tangled thoughts. I sat on the edge of the bed, wondering how I was going to make it through the night. In the middle of the night, a soft noise woke me up. I barely opened my eyes, just enough to scan the room. I noticed Gary shifting on the bed. He seemed to be half asleep, running his hands through his hair and scratching his head lightly. I found myself watching him, but my eyes were only partially open, pretending to still be sleepy. Inside, though, I was anything but calm. Then I felt it, his eyes on me. My heart began to race. He was watching me. I tried to keep up the act, to keep the sleepy look on my face and to stay calm, but inside I was buzzing with energy. Slowly, Gary began to undo the belt of his robe. As it loosened, the robe slipped off his shoulders, revealing more of his toned young body. The way his muscles moved slightly with his movements sent a strange warmth through me. I couldn't stop myself. At that moment, I realized two things. I had no control over what was happening, and part of me didn't want to stop it. Gary took a pair of shorts out of the cupboard. He kept looking at me, as if he wanted to find out if I was awake. His looks made me even more aroused. I tried very hard not to give anything away, but at the same time, I let myself get caught up in the moment. After putting on his shorts, he didn't come back to bed. Instead, he sat on the chair in the corner of the room and just started watching me. Being watched so intently was both unsettling and stirred something indescribable deep inside me. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to be asleep, but how long could I keep up the act? Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer and sat up. When my eyes met Gary's, I made sure my voice didn't shake as I said, not hiding how I felt, "You make me so excited, Gary." I could feel those words hanging in the air. At that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Gary's eyes flickered for a second. Then he took a deep breath and began to speak. "I don't know, Carmen," he said, his voice low but steady. "We've been living under the same roof for a while now, since my father left. And the more time we spend together, the more I feel for you. You may not realize it, but sometimes I can't hide my admiration for you. Right now, it feels like a dream." His words surprised me, but they also stirred something in me. Gary didn't look away. His eyes held mine with a kind of honesty and passion that completely captivated me. "I have to get up early to get the car fixed," he went on, although his voice sounded like he was trying to convince himself. But his eyes didn't waver, not even a little. "But right now, I can't take my eyes off you, Carmen. I've never felt like this before." My heart was racing. At that moment, I moved to the edge of the bed and sat down on the chair right in front of him, my eyes locked with his. The energy between us was so intense it didn't need words. We sat there in silence for a moment before I pursed my lips slightly and fixed my eyes on him. "Gary," I said slowly, my voice filled with both curiosity and challenge. "Are we talking about the same thing?" Gary's gaze deepened, as if he wanted to experience this moment through feelings rather than words. He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said it all. And then I realized that there was no turning back for us. As I stared into his eyes, a wave of courage and uncontrollable desire washed over me. The mix of hesitation and passion in his eyes only pushed me further. I took a deep breath and began to speak again, my voice calm but firm. "Gary," I said, getting his full attention. "When I came into the room, you were asleep. Your robe was a little open, and I couldn't take my eyes off you. It touched me more than I expected. We can't run away from these feelings. We both know that." With my words hanging in the air, I took a step forward and slowly stood up. His eyes followed my every move, his breathing quickening. I couldn't hold back the excitement that coursed through me. My fingers reached for the sash on my dress, and as I slowly untied it, I could hear the change in his breathing with every move I made. "I think," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "we need to even things up, Gary." I slowly unzipped the back of my dress. The fabric slipped off my shoulders and down to the floor. The cool air brushing against my skin only made the heat inside me burn stronger. The look in his eyes said it all: surprise, admiration, and an attraction he couldn't resist. The silence between us now felt like a bond, our breaths blending together. Without breaking eye contact, I took another step towards him. "Now," I said in a low voice, "let's see if we're really talking about the same thing." Gary's eyes remained fixed on me, his expression steady and full of fire. Suddenly, he stood up, never taking his eyes off me, and turned on the light in the room. The soft glow filled the room as he walked over and locked the door. My heart began to race. At that moment, it felt like the whole world had slowed down, leaving just the two of us. As he took a step towards me, my breath quickened. He seemed to be trying to read my eyes, but at the same time, he was fully aware of the silent attraction between us. As he came closer, his hands found my waist, and the warmth of his touch felt like an electric current running through me. Without saying a word, he leaned in and his eyes fell to my lips. I didn't object. I couldn't. Everything about it felt natural, like it was meant to be. When his lips finally met mine, all the tension inside me melted away. His kiss was slow, exploratory, but with an undeniable passion. My hands instinctively reached for his shoulders, feeling their strength and warmth surround me. The space between us disappeared completely as our breaths mingled. This moment felt like an explosion of all the unspoken emotions between us. Gary's youth and energy collided with the depth of passion I'd been carrying for years. It was the beginning of something, a beginning that was both terrifying and exhilarating. That night, there was no hiding what we felt for each other. I let myself fall back onto the bed, my body exhausted, but my mind racing. My breathing was still uneven. My foot brushed against the fabric of my dress, lying on the floor. I felt Gary's eyes on me, an intense and quiet energy radiating from his gaze. A moment later, he bent down and picked up the dress, his fingers lightly brushing over where my foot had been. Even this simple act sent sparks through me. As he held the dress for a second, I could see a flicker of hesitation on his face, but it was quickly replaced by determination. He set the dress aside, and his hands moved to the edge of the bed. Slowly, he climbed onto the mattress, his movements careful, deliberate. As he came closer to me, the expression on his face betrayed his feelings, equal parts excitement and magnetic attraction. As I lay on the other side of the bed, I felt Gary's proximity. My heart continued to race, and my breathing deepened. When I saw him leaning towards me, I realized that the distance between us had almost completely disappeared. It was as if everything had reached a breaking point. There was no going back. What I felt inside at that moment was overwhelming. It hurt and excited me at the same time. I looked up at the ceiling and could see Gary's face. I was fascinated by the way he was brushing his hair back from his forehead with his hand. I could see in his eyes what Gary was feeling. He was red, he was excited, and he was so happy. I could see that he was doing everything with great passion, and I was moved by the way he was out of breath. Gary had accelerated my emotions to the point that I was glad the car had broken down. "I will never forget this hotel," Gary said in a shaking voice, his words forced out, each one as heavy as a breath. His eyes were fixed on me, but his hands were shaking slightly. His body was tense, his muscles contracting, each movement a little more careful and precise, as if he wanted to hold on to a memory. "I don't want my father to sell the car anymore," he added. And after these sentences, he let himself fall next to me, closing his eyes without saying a word, waiting for his breathing to recover. I was exhausted and didn't even have the strength to say a word. My legs wouldn't stop twitching, and I didn't even realize how I had fallen asleep. The next morning, Gary came back with the car fixed and told me we had to pick up Logan and go to the town where he was. On the road, I was filled with regret and mixed emotions. But at the same time, I was excited. When I looked at Gary, his eyes, his actions, everything about him affected me. Everything was so complicated, and yet I still didn't know what was going to happen. I couldn't decide between the questions in my head and the excitement. The only thing I knew for sure was that this trip would be the moment that everything changed. If you've made it this far, I know my story has captivated you. Don't miss out. Hit the follow button, turn on notifications, and join us by leaving a comment on this story. I can't wait to hear what you think.